36 weeks of racing, February to November, and none of it truly matters in the grand scheme of things in NASCAR. Because no matter how dominant you are in every other race of the season, if you're lucky enough to sneak through the nonsense of the playoffs, you still line up against 3 other drivers who have an equal shot at a championship as you, no matter what they did prior in the season to even get there. The best way to compare this to other sports is by saying next score wins in a 1v1 basketball game where the score is like 20-3 already, and in no other year were the flaws of this format put on display more than in 2025, where we got treated to the greatest individual truck series season of all time, nearly being ruined by a late race caution for a driver running in the 20s, followed up the next night by the greatest rookie season in Xfinity Series history, actually being dashed because he only finished on the podium, and capped off by one of the most heartbreaking ends to a NASCAR Cup season in history. So where do I even begin to explain this weekend, and how NASCAR even got here to begin with? Let's start off with a small rundown of the playoffs for anyone new to NASCAR watching this and has no idea what I'm even talking about. Basically, you win a race in the first 26 races and you're in the playoffs no matter what else you do. So if you want to win once and run last every other race, go ahead, no one's going to stop you. The playoffs start with 16 drivers, and after 3 races the bottom 4 with the least amount of points are cut. Repeat this until you have 4 drivers, and you're left with the NASCAR Championship 4, where you put whichever 4 drivers who snuck through the playoffs up against each other for a 1-race finale, and the highest finisher of that race wins the championship. Now it's 2025, and we're on our 12th season of this format, 10 with trucks and Xfinity, and the format's about to be brutally exposed in every way possible. Enter Corey Heim. Mr. Heim has been busy since 2023, trying to capture an elusive Truck Series championship in these playoffs, which has already burned him a few times. Heading into 2025, he was left with a chip on his shoulder after the disappointing end to his first 2 championship bids. So how would the young phenom do? Well, he'd easily put together the most dominant sanctioned series NASCAR season in modern history over his fellow truck competitors, winning 11 of the season's first 24 races, while also leading a lap in every single race throughout the season, the first time this has ever been done in NASCAR history. This season included a stretch from June all the way until the end of the season, where Heim did not finish outside of the top 3 once, which amounted to an average finish of 1.45 across his final 11 races of the year. Oh, and he got robbed out of multiple wins throughout the course of the season, which hindered what could have been an even harder beatdown on the field. I mean, there is literally an argument to be made that he could have easily had 15 to 20 wins in the season. So what was Heim's reward for all of this, you might ask? Well, he found himself lined up against 3 other drivers with an equal shot at winning the championship as him after doing little to nothing compared to the 11 for 9 months. And after an ill-timed caution with 3 to go after outrunning his competition all night, Heim now finds himself restarting 8th in the race with 2 to go, after crew chief Scott Zipadelli made the call to take 4 tires on pit road, while his competitors took the opportunity, all taking 2 tires to cycle ahead of him off the pits. However, thankfully Heim still managed to take home the championship he so rightfully deserved, albeit taking a 7-wide move in turns 1 and 2 on the restart to get him there, meaning an entire season's worth of dominance could have been thrown away again for the 11 team had it not been for that move. This allowed NASCAR to dodge the bullet that would have been Corey Heim losing the Truck Series championship, yet unfortunately for everyone, they weren't so lucky the following night. NASCAR's Xfinity Series is known to have the best racing in NASCAR by far, and it's also where the next generation of NASCAR stars battle against each other across a grueling 33-week schedule to prove themselves to be ready for the Cup Series. Connor Zilisch entered the Xfinity Series at 18 years old in 2024, immediately winning in his debut, adding on to the resume that made him one of, if not the most hyped prospects in NASCAR history. So it was no surprise when it was announced that he would be full-time in the 88 for Junior Motorsports in 2025 and the Xfinity Series to fight for a title and Rookie of the Year honors. What was a surprise is how quickly he adapted to the series and immediately took it over. Zilisch had growing pains for the first few races of the full-time NASCAR driver, posting just 1 top 5 in his first 10 races, albeit being a win at COTA, while also having a multitude of issues blowing up a solid day for him, before being injured following a last lap crash at Talladega while leading on the backstretch. Connor Zilisch would be sidelined for 1 weekend while the series kept moving on into Texas, where his sub-in driver Kyle Larson put on an absolute beatdown on the field driving in his 88 car. Seeing how competitive his car truly was awoken something in Connor, and after this he'd put together the most consistent and dominant stretch in series history. Finishing in the top 5 6 weeks in a row, which included another one on the season, and what possibly should have been a win after getting used up by Shane Van Gisbergen at Chicago on the final restart. After this, he'd win the next 3 races in a row, followed up by a 4th place run at Iowa, and just for the fun of it, he'd win 4 more races in a row, despite issues with his celebration at Watkins Glen, and a little help from Parker Kligerman at Daytona, who'd win in relief of Zilisch after his victory lane injury. Although he wouldn't win 5 races in a row, he'd continue his top 5 streak on through the playoffs, only being dashed when the series got back to Talladega, the last race he'd competed in and not finished in the top 5, ending his streak at 18 races with a top 5 after being involved in multiple incidents throughout the race. So after 32 races in the season, Connor Zilisch would have wrapped up his quest for a title a week early over his teammate Justin Allgaier if this was a normal motorsports format, all while missing an entire weekend worth of points. But this is NASCAR where there's a playoff format, meaning he, like Heim the night before, was put on equal ground as 3 other drivers, being tasked to beat them in 1 race to wrap up the greatest Xfinity season in history. However, Zilisch wasn't as lucky as Heim to have by far and away the best car all night. No, instead he'd just have a solid top 5 car, and although he'd have to lead late, he'd be no match for his fellow Championship 4 competitor Jesse Love on the long run, eventually bringing it home with another podium finish of P3, while Love went on to win the race and the championship, his first win since Daytona to start the year. Zilisch was obviously left visibly distraught by this outcome, and at this point there was no defending the NASCAR playoff format. How could someone who won 10 races and scored the most points of any driver lose the championship? How can dominating a year and finishing 3rd in the finale equal losing a title to someone who scored 200 less points than you? At this point, after just the Xfinity portion of the weekend, everyone was sick and tired of the playoff format and was ready to wrap up the 2025 season. But NASCAR still had one more champion left to crown. Unlike the other 2 series in NASCAR, the Cup Series hadn't had one definitive dominant driver throughout its 36-race campaign, leaving the door wide open for any 4 drivers to enter the Final 4 once the playoffs started, and heading into the round of 8, any of the remaining drivers could have a case made as to why they can win the title. After 3 hard-fought races, only the best 4 of the bunch remained going into the championship race, with the 4 drivers competing for the title being William Byron, Chase Briscoe, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson, the most notable of which being Denny Hamlin, who entering the week had amassed the support of much of the NASCAR fanbase for him to win the championship for a multitude of different reasons. First being the fact that he had ran 20 years in NASCAR's top echelon of stock car racing, with 60 wins to his name and everything else you could ever want in a career, yet he'd never been able to call himself champion after the checkered flag had fallen for the final time in a season, despite coming close on numerous occasions. Mixed with the fact that Denny's dad was seriously ill, and this was his last chance he'd get to see his son achieving his lifelong dream of becoming champion, you'd have every reason to root for Denny Hamlin to win the championship, whether you liked him or not. The weekend started off as well as one could hope for the 11 camp, taking the pole in qualifying Saturday before the race to grant him the best pit box on pit road, and clean air to start off his bid for a title. Once the green flag flew, Hamlin immediately jumped out to the lead over Byron, yet he was slowly reeled in and passed over the long run by the 24 once the leaders got into heavy lap traffic to give Byron the stage 1 win. But Hamlin quickly retook the lead shortly into the next stage on a restart, taking over and dominating the race across the middle portions to show he was the driver to beat on this afternoon. On the flip side, teammate Chase Briscoe had been suffering the wrath of a 1-race finale to decide things, as a tire issue midway through his race put the 19 behind the 8 ball, being saved by a caution coming out at the same time as his tire failure. Yet problems soon arise for Hamlin, as so often happened when he was fighting for a championship, as during a pit stop from the lead under caution, the jack would suffer a rare malfunction, forcing the jackman on the 11 to have to quickly swap and get another jack to lift the car, costing Hamlin 10 spots on pit road, a brutal setback at a track as difficult to pass at as Phoenix. At the same time as this, Kyle Larson was also experiencing a pit issue of his own, which set him back as well, when the left front tire changer had an issue with the tire, putting Larson deep into traffic behind Hamlin. With 118 laps to go, Denny Hamlin found himself restarting in 12th place with a dominant car, while his other Championship 4 competitors found themselves 2nd, 6th, and 17th. And after 20 laps into the run, the 5 and 11 had already asserted themselves back into the top 10, continuing to rise up into the field, until disaster struck for the 5 team.
Welcome back to Phoenix, and disaster for one of our Championship 4 contenders, and Kyle Larson. He come on the radio and said, I had a flat slide, and then goes tire down, tire down. You could see it right there.
Just one lap after a Final Four driver lost a tire under green and was forced to pit, the exact same thing happened to another competitor.
And also the 19, Dave.
19 is complaining as well. Flat tire for Chase Briscoe. It's the right rear again.
He's going to try to get the pit road as he slides up into traffic, nearly getting hit by the 11 of Hamlin.
Bringing half the championship drivers onto pit road with under 100 laps left. The caution soon flew for another blown tire, allowing everyone to pit and for the 5 and the 19 to wave around back onto the lead lap, the only glimmer of hope they'd have for their championships. A few more cautions continued to shuffle the running order up, allowing Briscoe and Larson, who after running behind the other two for a majority of the day, a chance to make a strategy move for the title, both electing 2 tire calls with 32 to go on pit road, to put the Final 4 drivers 1st through 4th for the restarts.
Chase Briscoe leads this field to green, and maybe to a championship. Hamlin and Larson are side by side.
Huge advantage for Denny Hamlin here.
Watch the 24 of Byron. Blaney in the middle. Josh Berry in that 21 on the low side. Kyle Busch there in the 8. Berry gets a little wiggly. Here comes Hamlin on the inside of his teammate. Larson's up high there, 3 wide. 3 wide coming in to the front stretch, and the dog-legged William Byron makes it 4. Byron to the lead. You know that there's a championship on the line right here, right now. Look at the way they're driving.
How about that move by Denny Hamlin? He did not fight William Byron on corner entry. He just checked up, went to the bottom, and made the pass.
That should have been the highlight we remember of this race, but that's not at all the way the race ended up going.
Car, what a great job by the driver, the pit crew, everybody. Kim.
Oh boy, William Byron. William Byron has a tire issue and the caution is out.
Now the title was in the hands of the crew chiefs, and pit road became a chessboard, with the 11's closest competition in the 5 taking 2 tires, while the 11 took 4, putting him multiple rows behind a championship, a deficit he could not overcome.
And the 33-year-old from Elk Grove, California, Kyle Larson, comes to the line and is a 2-time champion.
Let's go, team! Let's go!
What can you do? It's just not meant to be. Team did a fantastic job. They prepared a championship car. It just didn't happen.
Can you do this again?
I'll try. I got a couple more shots at it, but, you know, man, if you can't win that one, I don't know which one you can win.
Everyone in NASCAR felt remorse for Hamlin, his rivals, his teammates, and probably even his biggest haters. They could all sense the injustice that had just came from that race, as after doing everything right to win in this format, it still wasn't enough for him to become champion. Funny enough, in a format based upon winning, it was a driver who hadn't won since May that won the title, and it was also the same driver that in a race designed to be a must-win race, never led a lap or at any point showed he was the best of the Final 4. But the kicker is, Larson statistically was the best driver that season and deserved to win the championship, playoff format or not, yet it still feels like a robbery occurred in Phoenix. Because that's what the NASCAR playoffs do. They destroy your already low viewership during the final months of the season. They make everyone on the outside devalue your sports championship, and they make your star drivers walk away or never want to step foot in one of your cars again. So what did the playoffs in NASCAR give us as a send-off? Well, I think just the worst weekend in NASCAR history.